Getting 8 people round the table to draft is one of the best Magic experiences you can have, but making sure that each new draft format delivers a great gameplay experience is just one of the many challenges facing designers and developers. Now, for the first time on Inside R&D, it's time to take you inside the draft for Dragon's Maze.
So when we first came up with the idea of doing a 5-5-10 split for Return to Ravnica, one of the things that really compelled us to do it was the idea that you created 3 unique different draft environments. We'd never done that before, where you come with the first set, you just draft the first set. And the second set, throw the first set away, you just draft the second set. And third set now, you get to go back to the first 2 sets, and now you get to pull through them. So the third set sort of says, how do all the sets work together? And that seemed very compelling to me as a draft environment.
A key part of the Return to Ravnica block plan that we started way before Return to Ravnica design began was plotting out what would the draft look like once Dragon's Maze was released. An important aspect of this is we knew you would draft essentially 3 guilds. You would pick 3 colors, 3 guilds, each with an overlapping color with the other guilds. You can't pick wrong. You pick 1 guild, you pick another guild that overlaps its color, you will automatically get a 3rd guild that's the other 2 colors. One of those guilds is in either Return to Ravnica or Gatecrash. The other one has 2 of those guilds. So you're never left with a set where there's just no guild cards for you. You will get Gatecrash guilds, you will get Return to Ravnica guilds. It's impossible to do it any other way. We spent many development meetings plotting out for each trio of colors, for each trio of guilds, what does it have in common? What is its core strategy? Why are you drafting these guilds together? To that end, to make that work, to enable these archetypes, we have a number of uncommon cards that act as build-arounds, that act as catalysts for these strategies. For example, Bread for the Hunt and Karazda Gorgon care about +1/+1 counters. One of them is green-black, one of them is green-blue. And green-black-blue together have a number of +1/+1 counter strategies to them, as it has Evolve and Scavenge, and black can pick up some black Unleash cards.
Limited Magic plays a lot around with the rarities of Magic. So common cards are the cards, of course, you see the most of in the packs. They tend to be the most simple cards, but they're also, imagine them kind of as the pawns. They're these usually a little more simple cards that just sort of do most of their work by either attacking or blocking or being combat tricks. A good example, like Steeple Rock in Dragon's Maze, is a 3/1 flyer for 5 that also has First Strike. It's a very simple card. It certainly has an impact in the battlefield, but it doesn't become the focus of the game as soon as it hits the battlefield. It's just a good card that helps your deck out.
So, being very conscious that Dragon's Maze was coming, both Return to Ravnica and Gatecrash are slightly faster formats than you might otherwise find. Because we knew Dragon's Maze was going to come, and it was going to just emphasize now the slower aspects of all of the guilds. You've got 3 colors now. We needed things that would give you some speed bumps, like the Gatekeepers, and we just knew it was going to play fundamentally differently. You'd see new expressions of the guilds, because it was a little bit slower.
When you get up to uncommons, all of a sudden you start getting more powerful removal spells, more powerful spells in general, but also you get cards that are a little more build around. These are cards that people want to have in their decks, and your deck maybe focuses around this card. So a card like Gleam of Battle, which is a 6-mana enchantment where all your creatures get a +1/+1 counter whenever they attack. Well, when you get this card, all of a sudden you start thinking, well, I want to maximize this. I want to have a lot of small creatures so I get the maximum number of counters or some evasion creatures so that my creatures are getting bigger and they can't be blocked.
So in design, we debated a lot about how much mana fixing to put in the set. And as the development representative on the team, I kept arguing for more mana fixing. We're switching from 2 colors in the first 2 sets to 3 colors here. We don't just need enough as if all 3 packs were 3 colors. We have to make up the deficit in the first 2 packs. And so, frustrated by not getting my way, I suggested, what if the entire basic land slot were replaced with gates? That way, you don't have to learn a new card, you don't have to wonder what's on the land row, they're the same gates as the other sets, but you get enough mana fixing to play your colors and have your deck work.
So the clue stones actually get their origin in Shards of Alara. The obelisks that were in Shards originally sacked to draw you a card, And for simplicity reasons, we simplified them and took that away. But we always liked that rider. It seemed like a very neat thing to have on a mana source, because that way you can run them without fear, because if you ever need cards later, you can trade them in.
Cluestones fill two important roles for Dragon's Maze. One, they fix your mana. Really is going to make it a lot easier to play 2, 3, even 4 colors. Now, the downside of this is, well, it's taking up a slot in your deck, and you don't want to be flooded. They do cost 3 mana, so it doesn't really let you cut a land for these. But let's say you've got your colors fixed. You're all set and ready to go, but now you've got this Cluestone that's here doing nothing. Cycling was an old mechanic that said you could discard a card to draw a new card by paying a cost. This, rather than discarding it, you pay the cost, you sacrifice it from play, and you get that new card.
As we move up in rarity, you get into rares where these cards are some of the most powerful for draft. And they're cards you don't always want to see every single time you draft. Advent of the Worm is a 4-mana instant that creates a 5/5 worm token. This card, it's great when your opponent attacks and you get to play it, kill their guy, you can untap and populate. It's a very powerful card and it's very fun, but it's only fun when it comes up sometimes. It's not fun when it shows up every single time you draft.
So one of the challenges going into Dragon's Maze was that we knew we'd wanted to have lots of gold cards because every guild needs to have a certain number of gold cards to make it interesting as part of the set. In order to do that, we ended up making all of the uncommons gold because we couldn't have too many gold cards at common because it would mess up the draft format and you wouldn't be able to draft 3 colors very easily. Because of that, that was a perfect spot to put the split cards, which are gold cards that are also monocolored cards.
So Far and Away is a pretty cool card, because you can cast it as an unsummon, you can cast it as a Diabolic Edict, or, you know what's even more convenient with Diabolic Edict, is to first remove one of your opponent's creatures to force them to sacrifice this creature. And that's an exciting thing. Alexis mentioned them very early in design, that she was excited by this little twist on the split cards from Ravnica. And initially we were told rules aren't going to let this work. But she plowed ahead, we plowed ahead, and you can find ways to make things work if they're cool enough.
One of the aspects of the split cards that we worked on is making the 2 halves together feel like slightly more than the sum of their parts. We want each half to be very playable on its own. We want paying the fuse cost and playing both halves to be good for you, but not so much better that that's the only thing you do. You only ever play it with fuse, and why is it even a split card? A good example of this is Turn and Burn. Each half, very playable on its own. You might use them fused to do 2 completely different things, shrink a blocking creature, burn a different blocking creature or your opponent, or you can combine them together to kill 1 creature regardless of its size.
Finally, you get Mythics. These tend to be the strongest cards in Limited. These cards are ones that we don't want showing up every draft. In fact, we only want them showing up every few drafts. They are the cards that, like Planeswalkers, that usually dominate the field of battle the second they hit there. This is a fun and interesting thing to have happen a few times. It's not interesting if every single game comes down to the Mythics, of course. So we do like to make sure that there aren't too many of them in the draft.
I think there are some elements you need for a great draft environment. The first are some things you can figure out to do right away. And you don't want to be a huge puzzle just to get started. And you need enough removal that you can interact with what your opponent is doing. The last thing you need is that those initial things aren't the only things. If they're too dominant, that's all there is to do. Here, there are some synergies, but there's a lot of open room to explore. Development barely scratched the surface. I think this will be fun to draft for a long time.